Welcome to this webinar on mobile food vendor courts. We're looking at, the town of Scarborough is looking at doing an ordinance to allow the I'm having a real hard time today, to allow the mobile court to be in certain zoning districts. I'm going to introduce Autumn Spear right now, who is our planning director, and she will take us through a presentation. And then we're going to ask some questions afterwards. And then this video will be posted on the SEDCO website and on the page associated with this ordinance on the planning site. And hold on just a second, and I'm going to share my screen, Autumn. Oops, I don't want to share my screen.
Oh, no, I'll share mine in just a bit.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen. My name is Autumn Spear. I'm the planning director. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I'll go over that details the information about the proposed ordinance and the proposed license. And we'll take questions at the end. So I'm going to share my screen. So this really came about. We have received many requests in the past several years for food trucks. We receive constant questions about where food trucks can go. We do have a policy internally that we permit food trucks at one-time events, at private events, catering, that sort of thing. We do not currently have a license requirement for those, and we do not allow food trucks in a more permanent manner. We've also recently received a request for a mobile food court, and that is really a collection of food trucks, if you will. So with that, we decided to take this request to the Long Range Planning Committee. That group meets monthly. They look at the ordinances in town. They review those ordinances and proposals against the comprehensive plan. And we discussed this item on August 9th and September 13th. At those meetings, staff created a draft proposal for them to review. We considered what type of food trucks we wanted to permit and where. And after we drafted that, SEDCO also put out a survey to get some general information from restaurant owners, deli owners, small businesses that could really help gauge this conversation in a different way if it needed to go differently. To date, we have only received one response for that, so we feel like we are in a good spot to move forward with this ordinance. So the first part was really to define the uses. What is a mobile food truck? I think we all have an idea of what a mobile food truck is in our minds, but really they can vary in how they're defined and where they can go. So that was the first part, and then we wanted to figure out where they could be. Could they be everywhere? Could they drive around town? Could they be at the beaches? Could they be at city parks? And then when you allow a use like this, you also have to consider what sort of licensing has to be taking place. So we had to create license requirements. So the first part, we defined a mobile food vendor as a vehicle, trailer, cart, or stand designed and constructed to transport, prepare, sell, or serve food and/or beverages and capable of being moved from its serving site at any time. We also defined mobile food vendor court as a collection of two or more mobile food vendors in a common outdoor plaza or site providing a common area for self-serve dining. For the purposes of this definition, the mobile food vendor court may be an accessory use to the primary use of the site or the primary use of the site. So by creating these definitions, now we have a defined place for the courts, and the vendors can be on the courts. So when we looked at zoning considerations, we essentially decided to permit the mobile food vendor court use in all non-residential districts that currently permit restaurants. This is really our Route 1 corridor, Payne Road, Eight Corners. So these districts on the slide are where you could do a mobile food vendor court. So our town and village center districts, Higgs Parkway, the Downs, Running Hill mixed use district, And then the regional business district, general business district, business office research, and the industrial districts. So these districts all permit restaurants now. So the thought is we are not permitting a new use, we're just permitting a different type of restaurant use. So we're still keeping some locations as exempt. So a one-time event, if someone is having a wedding or a graduation party, it's on private property, you can still have a food truck as long as it's not operational for more than 36 hours. You would have to get a license. That food truck would have to be licensed. A private catered event, if you have an ongoing event for your employees and it's private, it's not open to the general public, there's no advertising, that's still an exempt location. And then, of course, town-sponsored events. We have an event coming up Sunday, Sustainable Scarborough Day. Mobile food vendors may operate there as well. But again, even in these exempt locations, a license would be required. So there are 4 ways a food truck can locate, four areas a food truck can locate. One of these exempt locations or an approved court. What's not permitted is the driving from site to site food truck. That is not contemplated in this ordinance. So the thing about the mobile food vendor court, we wanted to treat them really the same as a restaurant. So they would, if they're in the correct zoning district, they would have to go through the same site plan standards and site plan process that a restaurant would have to. So that requires planning board approval. So Chapter 405B are our site plan requirement, and they would apply in the same manner, except for the architectural design standards would not apply to the vending units themselves. That's one of the hiccups we've had in the past, is that we didn't have an out for a mobile food vendor truck, and a wheels, movable, is not permitted currently in architectural standards. So this would be the only thing that doesn't apply. They would have to meet the same performance standards that a typical use. So setbacks for the lot itself would be the same as in a zoning district. For a restaurant, electrical connections are required. Each pad site on the court has to have space for 10-foot separation between each vendor. The pads themselves have to be paved or an approved surface. And then temporary or permanent restrooms have to be provided. The EV parking standards do not apply for this. So that's really the only thing that differs in the performance standards. So again, a court is, if I was a property owner and I had a half-acre site and I wanted to have a mobile food vendor court, I would go through the site plan process and I would show 5 pad sites for mobile food vendors that they could go on. I would not get approved a specific vendor. I would just show the spaces that they could go on. And then I would have to provide parking, landscaping, lighting, all of the typical things that a site plan would require. And then if I'm the mobile food vendor and I want to go on that court, I have to get a license. And part of that license requirement is to show where I'm going to go. So I have to be able to show that I'm going on an approved location if I'm getting a license in Scarborough, or I'm doing a one-time event. So the license requirement would apply to all food trucks operating in Scarborough. It would take the place of a food handler's permit. The approval is through the town clerk's office. Town council is the initial approval authority, and the town clerk would be doing renewals thereafter. So there's some general requirements. Each food vendor would have to meet all state of Maine Health Department regulations. They would have to hold a state of Maine eating place mobile license, comply with the state of Maine rules relating to eating and lodging, and sell only food, beverages, and associated related and incidental goods. The equipment, fuel-powered generators are not allowed on courts. They would be permitted at the one-time exempt locations. Vehicle cart must be attended. There are certain dimension parameters. Gray water holding tanks required. Potable water supply is required. Electrical power is required. self-contained, and of course, the trailer vehicle needs to be registered and in good shape. There's also inspections required. They need to present a plan for how trash will be dealt with. No outside signage, so no waving flags or no signage in the right of way, no amplified noise. The license fee is $250 and there would be insurance required. So with that, our next steps, we have ordinance committee review next Wednesday, and then depending on the outcome of that meeting, we will go to town council first reading, town council public hearing. The planning board will hold a public hearing because this does change our zoning ordinance. And then we will have a town council second reading. So if it goes smoothly in October, I would anticipate this being in effect in January. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, Autumn. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if you want to stop sharing your screen for a second. So there we go. A couple of things that people have asked us about. Some of it you went over in the presentation, but the one concern was, do they have to do all the things that a restaurant has to do?
So yes, except for a few of the things that I mentioned, that the EV ordinance doesn't apply and the architectural standards don't apply to the food trucks themselves. Yes, they have to go through the site plan process, the same as a restaurant.
Great. And another question was with regard to where they can happen. I don't believe any of the zones that you were talking about are near the beaches. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there are no courts near the beaches. And then, so it does sound like restrooms, all of those types of services are going to be provided or have to be provided in some way.
Right.
One other concern that has been raised is about setbacks. And so could you sort of give us an example of like how close a mobile food vendor could be to the setback or to the property line?
It would really depend on the zoning district. We don't have any special requirements for a mobile food vendor to be located any further away from a restaurant than another restaurant would be. So
Okay,
if your zoning district has a 50-foot side yard setback, the mobile food vendor would be set aside 50 feet on their side and your restaurant would be 50 feet on the other side.
great, great. Just checking my list of questions. Oh, there was a question about would they be allowed on municipally owned property?
So the municipal property, if we do have some property that has the correct zoning, we would have to go through the site plan process. So it is possible. It's not contemplated at this time for the municipality to do anything like that other than for one-time events.
Okay. And I think there are a couple of businesses out there that, have had food trucks come to serve their employees. Could you talk about that and what they would need to do under this new ordinance?
Sure. So those vendors would need to get a mobile food license, and they would they would go through the inspection process, but they would be an exempt location, so they wouldn't have to the business itself does not have to create a mobile food vendor court. They can still offer that service as a private catered event, but a new requirement would be a town license for those vendors.
Okay. And can you talk about the permanency of these? Are these how flexible are they in terms of how long you would expect a court to be in business?
It's really hard to say. I think we are seasonal here in Maine, so the courts that are around us often shut down about this time of year and then reopen in the summer. But part of the site plan process that will have to be discussed and determined. And that's why I think sometimes the temporary restrooms may be an option if it's going to be an 8-month long operation and then renew, they may do temporary restrooms. But they may also create, you could also envision a place that used some permanent buildings two, and then add the temporary, more of the mobile food vendors throughout the year. So there could be some different situations.
Okay. All right. And can you talk about the seating that's going to be at a court? What type of seating is going to be required?
So we don't have any requirements for a specific amount of seating. That would have to be up to the owner of the property of what they wanted to propose.
Okay. All right. So I'm looking at some of the other staff folks that are here. Does anybody else have a question that they want to put out there for on the record for the public to see that Autumn can answer?
Good morning, Chief Kindlein.
Good morning.
So my role as the fire chief and local health officer, I've been learning a lot about the mobile food trucks from one of my partners at the state of Maine. One of the things that I would recommend, just for clarity in the ordinance, if we can get it in there, Autumn, is where you mentioned that the vehicle towing a trailer or something has to be in good condition. To make it very clear, they have to have a current state of Maine vehicle inspection. That would be valid. That would be an easy way to enforce the state police vehicle inspection ordinance. That way it's not ambiguous and it's something we can point to, say you have to have this to operate on the road. We're also going to require it for you to operate in our community.
Okay.
The other piece, I just was curious as to the reason why we won't require a food handler's license. I think I know the answer, but I don't want to preface it. Why we're going to skip that part of the requirement.
I think I'll let the clerk's office answer that one.
They're already being approved through the planning board process, plus they're also being inspected by the town as well, and they have to have state certifications. So we're just eliminating the food handlers.
That was my thought, Tody. The state does have that requirement that they have food handlers training and stuff like that. I just wanted to make sure that I understood why, if somebody asked why we're not making them do that. So thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
That's all I had.
Thanks.
All right. Brian, John, any questions or things that you want to point out from a code perspective?
Good morning, Karen and everyone else. I think one of the helpful pieces of material that we could probably attach to the food handler's license is some sort of an inspection checklist, so that when the applicant is going through the process, he can be prepared and knowledgeable of what we'll be checking through the inspection process. Everything that we would inspect is based on NFPA 1, Chapter 50, which is deals with commercial cooking. And there's a specific section in there that deals with mobile and temporary cooking operations that we could probably get on department or town letterhead and add that to the licensure process, just as a kind of a customer service piece for them, so they're not caught off guard when we're asking to check certain items that they may or may not have within their food truck. The one thing I can tell you with food trucks is it's a very competitive business. And so we want to make sure it's an equal playing field and we're holding everyone to the same code and standard that's should be done. The second piece, I know several communities around us have a very extensive food truck process to include the city of Portland. And Chief Kindlein and I have discussed, if the truck has been licensed and inspected in the city of Portland, say in March, would we take that inspection knowing what their process is and simply use that as our inspection? And that's something I think, as long as we year to year were to communicate with our partners that are doing these inspections and their inspection standards and what they were holding the food trucks to met ours, then I'd be comfortable doing that, as to not make them sit through another inspection, 10 miles from where they just did in another jurisdiction. But that's, again, something that I think would be a good customer service piece to work with them on, as long as that municipality is doing the same type of and same level of an inspection. Because I know with food trucks, that is not always the case. Some municipalities are not set up to do an inspection process with us. They don't have the staff. And so that they have a very kind of a loose ordinance that allows them to operate regardless of what safety features they may or may not have in their truck.
That's great. That's does streamline the process somewhat. And Autumn, could you briefly outline like what the responsibilities are. So the food trucks have to do some things, and then the lot owner has to do other things. So could you
Sure.
just do a brief divvy up of the tasks there?
Sure. So the lot owner, the mobile food vendor court, they have to first of all ensure they're in the correct zoning. Then they go through the site plan process and they get an approved site plan. And then the mobile food vendor themselves, they have to find an approved location to go on. So make contact with someone who has an approved court, and then they have to get a license through the town. And the license includes the inspections. And as Deputy Chief Brennan mentioned, I think that what we could do is have that inspection checklist, and then down at the bottom say, if you have, received an inspection by the city of Portland in the last so many months, you all decide the inspection may be waived.
Great.
Do something like that.
Okay. And so where does everybody start out? Just to clarify, if you're the property owner, you're going to go to the planning department.
Mhm.
So if you're a mobile food vendor, are you starting out with the clerk's office, or are you also starting out in planning and then they'll direct you?
I feel like as we get started, they would probably need to start out with planning first and foremost to find out where they could go, because even if they went to the clerk's office and got a license, they can't just go wherever. So they need to have a conversation with us. Now, once we have some courts actually established and then it gets well known, then they can just go straight to those owners in the clerk's office. But the idea is to maybe get one or two of these established, and then that process will be pretty easy.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else that we should ask to make sure people are aware of? All right. Doesn't sound like it. So Autumn, where can people go to find out more and to watch this video? You can
Sure,
watch the
so
video on the Sedco site, but it will also be on the town site.
So you can go to the town of Scarborough's website and click on what's happening, and it's in there. You can also find it through the planning. You can do a search for food trucks. So there's several different ways. And we have the current ordinance draft up. We have, we'll have this link to this video and some other additional information.
Okay. And then just to be clear for everyone, we are talking about mobile food vendor courts only. We are not talking about individual trucks. So that is still, not allowed in the town except with a catering use. But we are talking mobile food courts only with a minimum of 2 trucks. Is that our 2
Correct.
types of vendors? And sometimes we lapse into this and say, at least I do, trucks, but the mobile food vendor can be multiple types of vendor. And I don't know, Autumn, if you want to
Correct. So it
talk
could
about that
be,
just for a second.
a trailer that is dropped at a site. It can be a truck. It can be a cart. But yes,
Okay.
multiple options.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. And we'll get this up as soon as possible. And I appreciate everyone's time this morning.
Thank you, Karen, for putting this together. I appreciate it. Thanks.